Hey boys and girls, welcome to another super exciting, outrageous toy review. Today, we're taking a look at the vintage Kenner Star Wars action figure of Ben Kenobi. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. This action figure did a decent job of capturing the likeness of Sir Alec Guinness. It's not a perfect action figure, as far as it looking exactly like him, but it's probably closer than most of the actors from Star Wars. The Han Solo figure wasn't great, Luke didn't really look like Mark Hamill, Leia's was okay. Ben's is above average, I'd say. Obi-Wan Kenobi's figure has a vinyl cape, a brown plastic cape that he wears. This was common for those figures. You can actually flip it up if you want to pretend he's got his hood on. It's not perfect either, but a lot of times kids didn't always bend them down. Some kids did bend them down. These capes you do have to be careful with, though. They do get kind of brittle, and the armholes can rip over time. When I was a kid, I had a Ben Kenobi figure. He was one of two Star Wars figures I had as a kid before I had seen the movie. And I had no idea who he was. He just was an old man. I would use him with my G.I. Joes a lot and pretended he would vacuum clean stuff because he's just holding this nozzle here. If you haven't seen Star Wars, you don't know what that is. And I didn't have his lightsaber accessory. So with these A New Hope figures, Kenner came up with this really inventive way of operating lightsabers. They would put this blue plastic rod inside the figure, you'd slide it out, and the blade would extend. This one is damaged slightly. Let me bring in Luke. This is what the lightsaber should look like. There is a rod with then a little tip, a little tassel that goes on the end there. My Obi-Wan Kenobi's is broken, but that's just the way it goes. These lightsabers are frequently found broken. I never had a lightsaber for him as a kid. In fact, if I pull this out, I'll show you my childhood Ben Kenobi lightsaber, and it doesn't have the sliding feature, but I'd argue it's better than this Kenner one. One time, while visiting my grandparents in Florida, during the height of my obsession with Star Wars figures, when I was ravenously trying to collect them as a kid after they were out of stores, and I was buying them at yard sales and comic book stores, I noticed that my grandmother had a bin of colored toothpicks. Red ones, blue ones. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need these. And I went and grabbed my Obi-Wan and my Luke and my Darth Vader, and it was a perfect fit. And they were long, and they were pointed, and they could be hit against each other, and I was like, this is what I need. This is way better than the flexi plastic thing with the little tip on it. And so for years, I never even tried to get a lightsaber accessory because I was just so happy with these colored toothpicks. So this is how I always played with my Ben Kenobi as a kid. You even get a little bit of a satisfying clink when you're fighting. You don't have to worry about bending the tip off. I loved my toothpick lightsabers. If I move Ben's cape out of the way, you can see the figure beneath. He is sculpted wearing robes similar to what he wears in the movie. They did not use a lighter tan here to highlight the inner part of his robe, which is more accurate to the movies. But he does have a black belt and a black turtleneck here. It's interesting to notice that this character that wears a robe it does look like a robe, but it's sculpted like pants. They would later switch to these kind of characters wearing a robe that didn't appear to have separate legs, even though they were articulated here. There was a cut, the Emperor figure. And then at the end, when they went back to make the last few figures for Power of the Force, like the Anakin Skywalker figure and the Imperial Dignitary, they looked like the Emperor figure where it didn't look like pants, but when you slid the leg apart, there was sculpted detail inside here. So they've sort of played with this whole design aspect quite a bit over the years, Kenner, trying to kind of perfect how do you make an action figure of a guy wearing a robe. I kind of like the vinyl capes. They're not perfect. I do think it was interesting that they switched from vinyl capes to soft good capes later on, but they never went back and redid Vader and Ben and Leia. They just kept them with the vinyl capes throughout the whole production run. It would have been interesting to see them go back and maybe do cloth robes for some of these characters. I don't know what they would have looked like. Maybe better, maybe worse. Obi-Wan Kenobi's action figure was based on his appearance in Star Wars A New Hope. It was available for the entire time of the Star Wars action figure run, and they never refreshed it. They never repainted him as a shimmery blue ghost. They just kept making this Ben figure, which is fine. We used to pretend he was the ghost of Obi-Wan just like this. Anyway, many of the New Hope action figures only had one hand that could hold an accessory. Ben has a hand permanently shaped to hold just his lightsaber accessory, but his other hand is in a gripping pose, so you could give him an additional accessory. I don't know what you would give him, but I do like that feature. I like to be able to hand the toy something else. They don't have to be carrying a blaster around, but sometimes you roll up a piece of paper and pretend it's stolen plans, and you want to put it in the figure's hand, or a rope. You want the character to hang from a rope, and you want to tie it around their hand. It just adds play value, so I'm glad that since they tied up one hand with a gimmick, they made his other hand able to hold an accessory. When I was in middle school, there was a girl in my class whose last name was Zenobi, and I used to call her Obi-Wan Kenobi all the time. Tip to all you nerdy middle school boys out there, jokes like that do not help you get girls. There are two variations of the Obi-Wan Kenobi action figure, and I don't know if those two different variations come in both combinations, therefore giving you 4 variants, but let me explain. So there is a gray-haired Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is here, and there's also a white-haired Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. I had the white-haired one as a kid, and he fell one time and his head broke off, and sometimes we used to pretend that was the ghost of Obi-Wan. So there was white hair and gray hair. The other variation comes in his lightsaber. It's a little bit easier to explain it if I have this Luke Skywalker here, the vintage Luke. So the lightsaber should be like this, a rod with the little tassel on the end. But originally, the original plan from Kenner, and it's amazing, but very fragile, and so they scrapped it pretty quickly, was a double telescoping lightsaber, where both this piece and this piece would extend, so it would be longer. The little tassel piece slid inside this pole slid inside the arm, giving you 2 extension points. Most of those figures pretty much just came out with the early bird set. Maybe there's a few carded examples of them around. Double telescoping lightsabers are worth a ton of money, but you do have to watch out because there are people bootlegging that kind of thing. Once they switched it over to this version, then you get the single telescoping or just the regular lightsaber accessory. So you could have white hair or gray hair, single or double telescoping lightsaber. I don't know if they both came in both combinations, but the double telescoping lightsaber was on purpose dropped. I think the color change may have just been from one factory to another. My best friend and I never had the Anakin Skywalker figure as little kids. I do own him now. I think if we had had him, we would have played out a lot of adventures between the two, having no idea that Anakin turned into Darth Vader at such a young age, and that these figures look nothing like them in that prequel era, because the prequels hadn't been invented. But we used to imagine a lot about it, and pretty much we had this whole Jedi Knight buddy cop kind of thing in mind, based on just a sentence in the original movie. But I know we would have played out those adventures, because we loved playing out the angles of Star Wars that you didn't get to see in the movies. Because once you saw the whole trilogy, you kind of knew where everyone started and ended, and it didn't leave a lot of room for side stories, because all the villains got wiped out. Thanks for watching this super exciting, outrageous toy review. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos.